So today, Family Matters would like to welcome Michelle Schwartz from Clearbrook Transition Outreach. She's from Clearbrook, and she's a transition outreach specialist. She received her MS in education with an emphasis on behavioral analysis from Northern Illinois University. She has provided the outreach to students in special education moving from secondary education to adulthood in Chicago and the greater Chicagoland area since 2010. Michelle supports students with intellectual developmental disabilities with a linkage to appropriate funding and programming resources to help them lead satisfying lives in the communities where they live. Michelle has presented or co-presented on transition services at a local, statewide, and national level conferences for professionals, parents, and students with IDD. Prior to providing transition outreach services, Michelle spent 18 years at a community agency in Chicago, where she served as Director of Day and Residential Services for adults with intellectual disabilities. And I'd very, very, very much like to welcome Michelle today here to talk about a topic that we all struggle with understanding each step for. So thank you for joining us today, Michelle.
My pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for that introduction. So now I just need to figure out how I can get to my presentation. So do you need to change presenter or? Oh, show my screen. Here we go. Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
I'm sorry, I was muted the whole time. Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, so I'm going to start from the current slide. Perfect. Oh, is that the last of, oh, now I just, what happened? I lost the screen. Is it still showing?
It is still showing. I just turned my camera off, so that's probably why your screen dimmed.
Just turns out I was at the last slide. So we're going to just go back to the beginning. Oh my goodness, so much information. So let me just start by briefly letting you know the transition outreach specialist was initially funded through a grant through the Coleman Foundation in an attempt to assist students and their families and also education professionals to understand more about how students can be served in Illinois who have an intellectual and developmental disability. So initially UCP Seguin was the lead agency in Cicero, Clearbrook, and also Park Lawn, which is located in Oak Lawn, started the transition outreach specialist positions, and we did a lot of outreach and education to the Chicago public school system and outside the Chicagoland area. We expanded to 10 agencies, and then after 5 years, the grant expired, but the three of us, the original collaborators, have maintained the position as we have determined it's really important to help those students and educators and their families get connected to adult services. Okay, why aren't I allowed to go down to the next slide? I guess I just have to do it this way. That's perfect. So I think Abby provided a handout that's got the transition timeline on it. So I'm not going to go into this extensively, but it does list a number of activities to concentrate on during different periods of a child's transition. It starts at age 14 and a half in middle school, and then through the high school years, and then post-high school transition years. And this presentation is really an overview of a lot of the services and supports and resources that are available. I know it's a lot of information, but I have a lot of contacts and links throughout the presentation that you can refer to in the future. And the point really is not to overwhelm you, even though I know it's a lot of information, but just to provide you with that information. And I'm always available as a resource to answer questions or provide more information if you have them following this presentation. So first of all, transition is a process and not an event. So in thinking about it, there are a number of steps that made me think of like a staircase. In trying to prepare for transition and eventual adulthood, there are a number of things you can do prior to your child becoming an adult. And then there are things that happen at the age of 18. And then once they are in a transition program, looking towards their future and how they're going to live their adult life and what kinds of things will make a meaningful life. So this is just kind of a visual representation of the transition process. And in putting that together, it made me think of this visual, which is of a mountain and taking it one step at a time. And there's also an individual that's helping the individual. And that's how I would like you to look at planning for transition for the future. I hear the phrase falling off the cliff a lot, and I really would like to flip the script and have people think about climbing a mountain and thinking about the higher you go, the better the view, and just taking it one step at a time. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the role of the Independent Service Coordination Agency, because they are really the gatekeepers of having individuals receive services that's provided through the state for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So service coordination agencies are based on a geographic catchment area, and the role of the ISCs is to help educate individuals and support them in providing and finding those services to meet their needs. If you're not already aware of the PUNS list, it stands for the Prioritization of Urgency of Need for Services. That's statewide waiting list for supports and services available for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So this is just a graphic of the state and all the counties and how they're organized. And on the left-hand side is the service coordination agency attached to that location. So there is one correction that Area K is no longer served by DD Services of Metro Illinois, but I'm going to show you a series of slides, and depending on where you live on the state, that's who you would be contacting in terms of getting your child on the PUNS list. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but for the community alternatives, we're in that northern Cook and Lake County region. Service Inc. serves a wide variety of counties in regions A, regions E, and regions F that are on the map, and the phone numbers and also websites available to contact them. Suburban Access serves South Cook County, and their information is there. And Community Service Options is the Chicago South Side and also West and Southwest suburbs. And Prairie Land Service Coordination Agency and their contact information serving regions G, J, and K. Southern Illinois Case Coordination, and Central Illinois. So those are the ISCs and how to contact them. So if you are listening to this webinar and you're not already on the PUNS list, or you know of a family or a parent whose child has not gotten them on the PUNS list, these are the 4 reasons that I use to explain to people why it's important or why I would encourage you to be on the PUNS list. And the first one is that you don't have a crystal ball, so you can't predict whether or not your child will need services in the future. But if you determine later on that they do need services, at least you've completed that step by getting them on the list and having those services available to them. The second reason is because the allocation of resources in the state is based on the anticipated need for services. So right now, PUNS is 2 different categories. It's broken into 2 different categories. You're either seeking services, meaning you want services now or in the near future within 5 years, or you're planning for services, meaning you anticipate you might need services in the future, but you're not seeking them immediately. So again, if the state doesn't know the need or anticipated need for services, it's hard for them to allocate resources appropriately. And the whole goal of having the PUNS list when it was first created in 2006 really was to identify the need for services in an effort to expand resources. We've expanded a little bit, but we can always improve on that. The other thing I hear is that people say, well, they're not selecting children off the PUNS list, so why should I even bother? I can wait until my child is 18. Well, what I would say to that is at age 18, there's a lot of other things that you might be contemplating, whether or not guardianship is appropriate, maybe applying for supplemental security income or applying for adult Medicaid. That's a lot. Each of those are multi-step tasks and takes a lot of time to complete. So having that one thing scratched off your list prior to age 18 is just one less thing that you have to do. And the final reason is that if funding is available for children and you're not on the list, you don't have any opportunity to access that. And I know there was a long dry spell where children were not being selected off the list, but in fiscal year 23, they were able to select 100 children off the list. And just for this fiscal year, FY24, they selected 500. So again, if you're not on the list, you don't have the opportunity to be selected to receive those services. So that's my pitch for getting on the PUNS list if you're not already on the list. When do you contact your ISC? So you can contact them as soon as you are aware that there is a developmental disability. They're actually saying as young as 2.5, but certainly if that child is receiving early intervention services that ends at age 3, they can be selected from the PUNS list to receive services as young as age 3. Every year there's an annual update that's usually just done over the phone just to make sure all the contact information is up to date, and if there are any major changes in the service needs of the individual or in the family dynamics that would change their priority on the PUNS list. Certainly you can contact the ISC whenever your particular situation changes, or you move, or you have a new phone number, just so that you can be contacted if necessary. And then you certainly would contact the ISC if you receive an award letter from Department of Human Services or a letter to apply for services. And if you're on the PUNS list and your child is 18 or over, you can send an email to dhs.ddd.puns@illinois.gov with your child's name, address, and their date of birth, along with the name of the ISC, and you will get a response as to when you'll be selected off the list, an approximate date. And I can tell you that due to a lot of advocacy and the Liggis class action lawsuit, there is now a reasonable pace that's been designated for individuals who are 18 or over, that they will be selected from the list if they're seeking services within 5 years or 60 months. I know they're a little bit ahead of that right now. It seems like a long time, but there was no reasonable pace that people had to be selected off the list. So we're getting better, as I said. At least there's a reasonable pace that by age 23, if you're on the list at 18, you will be selected from the list. So that's good news. While you're waiting for services, if you are in need, you can also contact your ISC about respite services that might be available in your area. Clearbrook does have a respite program, and Michelle Bosco is the Director of Respite Services. Her contact information is on there, but we're not the only provider of respite services, so depending on where you live, your ISC can give you information about who to contact for respite. Respite services are available to individuals who are not receiving any funded services through the state Medicaid waiver program, either home-based services or through the Department of Rehabilitation Services. And right now, Clearbrook is running 2 separate respite programs. One is a voucher program where an individual receives an allotment of money to be used on special recreation or other recreation activities that a family can be reimbursed for in order for that child to be in a supervised setting and giving the caretaker a break, or the respite services can be provided in the home with a care provider who is not a family member that lives in the home in order to give the caregivers a break. So there's an allotment of money that can be used to be reimbursed for those services. It works out to be about 10 hours a month, I believe. And then there's also a group respite program that's currently available for adults ages 18 and over. There's 2 locations that Clearbrook is running 2 times a month on Saturdays. One is located in Crystal Lake and the other one is in Palatine. I put this on so that people can kind of see in terms of the Department of Human Services in Illinois and what are those agencies that might be appropriate for your child to access, or those resources that are available. So we just had a change. Dulcie M. Quintero is the new Secretary of Illinois Department of Human Services in September of this year. And we also have a new Division Director of Developmental Disabilities, Tanya Pipoff. She was just received that position in June of this year. The other agencies that are bolded there on the right-hand side, Tim Berry is the Director of the Division of Family and Community Services. That's the Medicaid departments for the state. And then on the left-hand side, that's David Albert. He's the Director of the Division of Mental Health. And then on the lower right is Ronnie Patrick, and she's the Director of the Division of Rehabilitation Services.
Hey, Michelle, we have a question real fast.
Yes.
So once an individual is selected for the PUNS list, and will they then like the next year have to like reapply for PUNS? Does it change? Because I know you can be selected and then not start to receive services quite yet. So during that year, would they have to reapply if they had not received services?
So once you're selected off the list, the idea is that you should be in the process of obtaining services within 6 months. So if you are on the list and you're not really ready to start receiving services, or within the next 6 months, you might just be remaining on the list and not starting your services. So I don't know if that answers the question, but once you're selected, I would encourage you to go ahead and start to receive services to some capacity, what would be appropriate for your individual. And right now I'm going to talk about the 2 different options that are available once you are selected. So you can either select to receive what's called home-based services, and that's for both children and adults. So there's a children Medicaid waiver, home-based waiver, and also an adult home-based waiver. Or there are CILA services, and the CILA services, community integrated living arrangements, is for adults only. So for a child, you would be considering to receive those home-based services. So what are home-based services? It's really personal support, one-on-one, to be provided in the individual's home, their family home where they're living, or out in the community. And for adults, it also pays for an adult community day service, a licensed program through DHS. They're called CDS now, Community Day Service. It can also provide active treatment and activities of daily living, clinical services such as PT, OT, and speech for adults. For children, those are typically provided in the school setting, but behavioral services are also available, as well as vocationals, training, supported or competitive employment, job coaching, those kinds of things. And then I put supportive housing on there for individuals who are able to live independently but might need some support to check in on them to make sure that they're keeping a clean apartment, or to help them with budgeting or grocery shopping or meal planning, preparation, anything like that. And then on the right-hand side, if your child is an adult, you could choose the CILA option. And there are a number of options within the CILA model. The typical option is a group home, which is for between 1 and 8 individuals, and it's can be 24-hour support, which means typically that there are shift staff that are at the Scylla home around the clock. Or it could be intermittent support. And intermittent support, depending on the needs of the individual, obviously staff are not there 24/7, maybe they're 8 hours a day, or depending on what the needs are. And those intermittent Scyllas are typically run by an agency, or it could be delivered through the family home, but there's agency hired staff that provide the support to the individual. The other option there on the top is called a host family Scylla, and that's where there is live-in caregivers. So either a single or a couple is providing that 24-hour support to either 1 or 2 individuals in a host family Scylla. This just explains a little bit more about how those home-based services are delivered. It's based on the maximum supplemental security income amount. So for 2023, that SSI amount right now, the maximum that an individual could receive is $914 a month. We were recently made aware of the increase for 2024. That maximum amount is going to be $943 a month. So for children who are receiving the home-based waiver, the amount is 2 times that SSI amount. So for this year, it's $1,828. That will go up to $1,886. And what that means is you have that amount of money available to purchase the one-on-one support for your individual in the family home or helping them out in the community. Children also have the ability to have flexible spending where they can use up to twice that maximum amount in the month, and that's just to allow during summer vacation or winter breaks when school is not in session for families to be able to access more support during those school breaks. When a child, or I'm sorry, when an adult is out of school, they then receive 3 times that SSI amount. So in 2023, that's $27.42 per month, and that's going to go up to $28.29 next year. With the adult who's out of school, there's no flexible spending, but you do have a higher amount that can be utilized for one-on-one support, as well as, like I said, it does cover the cost of a community day service. There are 2 different ways that home-based services can be delivered. One is called self-directed, where the family or parent is providing hiring the staff, training the staff, supervising the staff, and really directing those personal support workers on their own. Or you can work with an agency who will hire the staff, train the staff, and provide supervision for the staff. Or in a case such as Clearbrook, we also provide assistance to those families who want to be self-directed but still have some assistance with some of the paperwork and billing that's required. And then the other feature of the home-based services is a one-time, they call it a one-time funding, but it's $15,000 over a 5-year period that can be utilized for assistive technology or home or vehicle modification that's needed to accommodate a disability, but it renews after 5 years. So,
Real quick question about home-based services.
yes.
So our question is, if a PWD is selected from the PUNS list who is 16 years old for the children's waiver, but does not qualify for home-based services, will he remain eligible for the waiver as an adult?
So when you say does not qualify for services, is that due to the level of the disability? Because the home-based waiver, it has the same criteria for eligibility. So it must be, and I'm gonna, maybe I didn't put that in this slide deck. The definition of a developmental disability that occurs before the age of age of 22 that affects 3 or more major life areas such as self-care, communication, mobility, self-direction, and the capacity to support themselves or economic self-sufficiency. And I think there's one more category, learning perhaps. So if it affects at least 3 of those areas, they should meet the eligibility. So I'm not sure if you're saying the person's not eligible, but the criteria is the same whether they're a child or an adult. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, Amanda, if not, you can absolutely ask me more in the chat and we'll try to figure it out together.
This is really just about Clearbrook's home-based services. We are the largest provider of home-based services in Illinois. We're currently serving over 1,600 families in 16 counties. And this slide has a little bit more about community living arrangements, community integrated living arrangements, but I pretty much explained that on the previous slide. But the list of providers is on the DHS website, so I put the link there, but you can find out who those SILA providers are. Actually, that link will also allow you to look for home-based service providers in the state as well. This is just a visual example of what community integrated living arrangements may look like. It's basically looks like any other home that's in the community. It could be a single family home, it could be a condominium or townhouse, and it's going to depend on that actual home as to how many bedrooms there are, how many individuals live there, as to whether they have their own bedroom or a shared bedroom. As I said, 8 is the maximum number of individuals that can live in a SILA home. The more recent homes have been opened with 3 or 4 individuals, so really trying to make it a little bit smaller so everyone can have their own bedroom. Typically, you think of a SILA as being 24-hour support staff, and depending on the needs of the individuals in that home, those staff may be able to be awake, or sometimes they're allowed to sleep during the night and be available if there's an emergency or need. But as I said, there are SILAs that are less than 24-hour, just offer intermittent support. So another resource that's available that's not part of the PUNS list is through that Department of Rehabilitation Services, or DRS. And I brought up that slide earlier with Ronnie Patrick. She's the director of this agency. And it's a little bit confusing because they have a program that sounds a lot like home-based services, but it's funded through a different Medicaid waiver. But first I'm going to talk about the DRS vocational services, because most people think about DRS as being providing that vocational or job placement support. So often in schools, there's a connection with the DRS representatives who help provide job development, job placement, and job coaching. Some schools have the STEP program that's funded through the Department of Rehabilitation Services, but those services can continue for individuals throughout adulthood. So you can have a doors counselor to help you obtain employment, and once that employment is obtained, if the person is working independently and no longer needs the support, the case could be closed, but it could be opened at a future time should there be a need to receive those services again. On the right-hand side, I have the DRS Home Support Program. So it's similar to the home-based services through the Developmental Disabilities Waiver, but this is geared more towards individuals who have maybe ambulation or medical, more physical needs, and it's based on a determination of need score. So there's an assessment, a nursing score, and if you are eligible based on your score, you could receive one-on-one support in the family home. And it's not required that you be selected off the PUNS list for those services. I will say though, if you are receiving those DRS in-home support services and then get selected off the PUNS list, you then need to make a choice which is going to support your family member the best, if it's the DRS in-home support or if the DHS DDD home-based support waiver is going to better meet their needs.
We
Use
have a
it.
very common question here, Michelle.
Yep,
Someone wants to know if DOORS and DRS are the same
the
program.
same thing, yes. Division of Rehabilitation Services and DRS, it's the same.
And then,
They've gone
yeah, go
lots of
ahead.
different acronyms, but it's
Yes. Yeah, and then a common question we get a lot, do you have to reapply for PUNS every year after you've been selected or after you've not been selected, or does it just keep carrying over?
it just keeps carrying over. You don't have to reapply, but like I said, every year, the PUNS, the ISC should be contacting the family just to update. So they just want to make sure that you are still living in the state and still in need of services, but you can always update more frequently if there is a change or you move, but it's not reapplying, it's just updating so that they have accurate information on the list. They want to prevent sending out letters for people who've been selected that may have moved or no longer be in need of services if they moved out of state or something like that. So every year there should be an annual update. Okay. This slide is about supportive housing, and again, that home-based waiver can be used to help someone who is able to live independently, and again, by providing that one-on-one support. It's not for 24 hours a day, but for someone who might need just a little bit of assistance to help them with cleaning in their apartment, helping them work on cooking skills, helping them work on budgeting, helping them work on accessing other things in the community, or supporting them through connections in their community. So that home-based funding can be utilized in that respect. And I also have some links on here for the affordable housing that's available through the statewide network of referral for affordable housing and supportive housing. There's a statewide referral network. I guess that link's not on here, but the Corporation for Supportive Housing can link you to that as well. This residential option is also a non-Medicaid waiver option, so you don't need to be selected off the PUNS list, but it's called Intermediate Care Facility, or ICFDD, and it's funded through the Department of Public Health. So a person would need to have Medicaid and typically are receiving Social Security benefits as well, but you don't have to be selected off the PUNS list, and the funding stays with the facility, not with an individual. So if there's a vacancy and you want to apply and you're selected to move into the ICF, you can do that without having to be selected off the PUNS list. Typically in the ICFs, there's nursing services available. They tend to be larger than the SILA setting. And I have from 16 to 100 or more individuals, but I just learned that there could be ICFs with fewer than 16 as well. And those individuals who reside in an intermediate care facility are also going to receive community day services in a program that would meet their needs. The difference between an intermediate care facility and a skilled nursing facility is that individuals are encouraged to participate in some type of meaningful day activity outside of the home, whereas in a skilled nursing facility, there's no requirement that they leave the home during the day. But individuals in an ICF would either be attending a community day service or volunteering, or perhaps even work in the community. So there's a list of ICFs in the state also on the DHS website as well. And then there are non-licensed Department of Human Services programs that I just want to mention. There are some community day services, some special recreation programs that serve adults that are not licensed to the Department of Human Services, which means they don't accept that Medicaid waiver for fee for service. They don't bill them directly, so you would have to pay privately. And the reason I just selected this slide is just if there is a adult day service in your area, you just want to make sure whether or not they do accept that home-based waiver when you're receiving that for services. This is just a list of things to think about what you can do while you're waiting to be selected from the PUNS list, because you don't have to sit there idly, but I already talked about the respite services, thinking about other future planning needs, such as whether or not a special needs trust is appropriate, planning for guardianship or other alternatives. Again, I mentioned at the age of 18 that young adult may be eligible for supplemental security income. There's an application process for that. When they're age 19, if they're not already receiving Medicaid, they can apply for adult Medicaid to have that in place for when they are selected off the PUNS list, since it is a Medicaid waiver program. Information about ABLE accounts and how to use those. And then just beginning to tour those residential providers or day program providers in your area, or at least become familiar with their names and look at their websites and what kind of services and supports are available. I mentioned the email that you can find out approximately when your child will be selected, and then just start thinking about a schedule of activities, including activities of daily living, maybe employment, volunteer, exercise and fitness, social leisure and recreation, all those kinds of things that will be part of your young adult's life when they exit school. Just a brief slide about special needs trusts. It is a way for individuals who have intellectual or developmental disabilities to be able to have money set aside for the future that will not jeopardize eligibility for Medicaid or Social Security benefits. So there are income requirements for both Medicaid and SSI, supplemental security income, and for SSI, you can't have more than $2,000 in your name. So if you want your child to be able to have other resources or leave them life insurance money or other inheritance, a special needs trust is a way to protect that money from being subject to the resource limits from Social Security. So they do need to be set up specifically by an attorney who's knowledgeable about special needs trusts. I have on here third-party trusts, and also if you already have assets in the child's name, you might move them to a special needs trust, which would be called a first party trust. So just something to think about before your child turns 18 and may be eligible to apply for that Social Security. When your child turns 18, I mentioned briefly about guardianship. I have a couple slides about that, but it's important to give that some consideration, whether or not you think your child is capable of making good decisions and using good judgment. That's basically the thing to think about in terms of whether or not guardianship is appropriate. It's not appropriate in all cases, so it's really an individual decision, and there are certainly alternatives to guardianship to think about, maybe being the representative payee for their Social Security income, or having educational rights while they're still in school. Powers of attorney are also considerations, as well as supported decision making, which has just been recognized in the state of Illinois. Again, supplemental security income may be something that can be a financial resource for your child based on their disability, and they can apply as early as actually the month following their 18th birthday, and then applying for adult Medicaid. Children are covered through their 18th year for Medicaid, and then at age 19 they can apply for adult Medicaid on their own, based on their own income and resources. I'm not going to go through this extensively, but I just wanted to make sure that you had the information. I just talked briefly about those alternatives to guardianship. Supported decision making, if you're not familiar with it, there is some information there. As I said, it was newly enacted in Illinois, that it's recognized as a way for an individual to choose some helpful support in making decisions for themselves. So they still retain all of their rights to make decisions, but they can recognize someone who's going to be involved in helping make decisions for them. And there's a couple of other resources here, the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, and also the National Center on Secondary Education and Transition has information, including guardianship information. To obtain guardianship of an adult with a disability, it is a legal process. It needs to go through the courts, so you can either work with an attorney who can help you through that process, or you can petition on your own or pro se. The petitions must be electronically filed in the circuit court of the county that you live in. There are fees associated with that. The individual needs to be served a summons prior to the court date. Lots of information on here. I'm very familiar with the paperwork that's required and can help individuals navigate that process if they're interested in more information about that. I mentioned the ABLE account, and that's another resource that individuals can take advantage of to be able to save money for the future that will not jeopardize their eligibility for Social Security and Medicaid. So ABLE is a law that was passed in Illinois. I believe it was in 2014, but there are other states in the country that have ABLE accounts as well. An individual who's eligible for an ABLE account is allowed to have one account. It doesn't have to be in Illinois, it could be in any state, and I put the website on there if you're interested in learning about different states' accounts and how they're being managed, because they are money market accounts and there's different aspects to how those accounts are managed. But it allows individuals, other individuals besides the individual the account is for, to contribute funds. For example, if they want to contribute financial gifts for birthdays or graduations, things of that nature, they can be saved in an ABLE account, and it's not going to count towards that $2,000 limit. They raised the annual maximum amount for an ABLE account this year to $17,000, and then there's a lifetime maximum of $100,000. So again, it's just another vehicle to use to be able to have an individual save money for future expenses or for a larger expense of over that $2,000 that won't count against them for their Social Security benefits. ABLE accounts are to be used for what's considered a qualified disability expense, which is really anything that's intended to improve the quality of life for the individual with a disability. So there's a list of things here that are considered qualified disability expenses. Like I said, it's a broad list. It can incorporate a lot of different areas. So this slide talks specifically about supplemental security income. It's a cash benefit for seniors age 60 65 and over, and also individuals who are 18 and over and determined to have a disability and who have assets less than $2,000. So there also SSI can be available for children. The asset limits are different depending on the home constellation and the family members, how many people are living there, how many children, and how many children with disability. But this is specifically for adults age 18 and over. I mentioned the maximum amount. You can do part of the application for SSI online. They typically do require either an in-person or phone interview before making a decision about eligibility. And they base the eligibility not based on what the disability or diagnosis is alone, but based on how that condition affects employment. So Social Security defines disability as the inability to obtain or maintain substantial gainful activity, and there's a dollar amount assigned to that as well. So the application process, like I said, is multi-step, and this says 30 to 90 days. I think that was prior to COVID. The applications are taking much longer now, 6 months or more in some cases. But I do point out that if an individual's already been approved for SSI at age 18, it's easier to be approved for Medicaid, and Medicaid can be a secondary insurance if individual is receiving private health insurance. The other Social Security program that sometimes parents are not aware of is the Social Security Disability Insurance. And basically, when individuals who are working and paying into Social Security or the FICA taxes, they can receive retirement benefits when they reach retirement age, or a spouse may receive survivor benefits off of a individual's work record, or if that parent becomes disabled, they can receive Social Security disability insurance off of their own work record. But what some parents may not know is that their adult child who's been determined to have a disability may receive Social Security benefits off of a parent's work record. So when that parent retires, or should that parent also become disabled and receive Social Security disability benefits, or upon the death of a parent, their child may receive survivor benefits from having paid into Social Security. So after an individual is receiving that Social Security disability insurance for 24 months, they're also eligible to receive Medicare, even if they're below age 65. So in terms of planning for the future, it's an important thing to know. This is just a list of things that are necessary in order to apply for Social Security. Like I said, I know it's a lot of information, but I'm a resource to help people with this application process because I know it can be a lot. Like I said, you can apply online, a portion of it, by providing information to Social Security that helps that approval process go a little bit more smoothly. And the next couple slides is a little bit about Medicaid. It is required to receive either home-based services or SILA services. For children who are selected off the PUNS list, they waive that income requirement for children who meet the eligibility of having a developmental disability. But for adults, it's based on their own income and resources, and that's starting again at age 19. Again, a list of items needed to apply for Medicaid, and the Medicaid application, you can do it all online. You can even upload the documents that are required. I put the DHS website information because they provide a lot more information about applying for Medicaid online, but it will also take you directly to the abe.illinois.gov, which stands for Apply for Benefits Eligibility. And again, I'm another resource to help you if you need to apply for Medicaid for your child.
So if a child or a young adult would stay on their parents' private insurance, do they still need to apply for adult Medicaid at that point?
They would need to apply for Medicaid because Medicaid is what is paying for those home-based waiver services or SILA services. So all the services that are available when you get selected off the PUNS list are paid through the Medicaid waiver. So a person needs to be receiving Medicaid in order to access those services.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yep. This is a public service announcement for any individuals who are already receiving Medicaid. If you moved within the last 3 years, it's important to notify Medicaid of your current address so that you can receive notification, because they're going to start, or they have already started, doing annual renewals for Medicaid. You will receive a letter in the mail stating it's time to renew your Medicaid. And if they can't find you, you won't be able to receive that renewal notice, and you could risk losing your Medicaid. So in case you moved in the last 3 years, make sure Medicaid has your current address information. I know we are getting close to the end. I just put this calendar schedule up here with some visual supports for families to start thinking about when your child is in transition, thinking about how you're going to fill up their day, or how their day is going to be filled up once they are finished with education, whether that's at 18, or if they go to 22, or if they're going to college. Whatever age their education, their formal education stops, how are they going to spend their day? So thinking about activities of daily living and how they can help with daily chores at home, to the extent that they're able to incorporate meal times and shopping for meals. When does the garbage go out, and the recycling, and when is laundry day, and then putting in those recreation and leisure activities. So try to start creating a schedule so that when school is over, their calendar isn't just blank. It is filled up with activities and things that are going to occupy their time. Transportation is another huge consideration for when school ends, because that door-to-door transportation by the yellow school bus is not going to continue indefinitely. But there are some resources available through the RTA. There's reduced fare cards that can be utilized for transportation in different communities and townships. I know there's also ADA paratransit, which will actually provide door-to-door transportation if you're eligible for that service. And like I said, the townships have dial-a-ride services. There's a pilot program I know that's in the DuPage area called Uber Access, where you can use your reduced fare card to reduce the charge for an Uber. So there are some transportation resources available, but it's important to start looking at what's available in the community that you live in.
And not to butt in at all, but it is a perfect time during your transition plan to incorporate transportation in there. Some teachers will like kind of replace that as a driver's ed, learn about stop signs, learn about how to navigate your town and your local transportation services. So any help you would need with adding that to your child's transition plan while they're in high school, please contact Family Matters and we can help put those supports in place.
Thank you for making that insertion. It's very important, because this is all part of transitioning. What are your, as well as recreation and leisure, what are you going to do when you're not with your buddies in school anymore? So just have a couple resources on here: the special recreation programs, Special Olympics, but even your local YMCA, or where you know, people work out or exercise in the community. Start thinking about what might be appropriate for your young adult, and make those connections prior to leaving school, so that they have some things that they're familiar with when school is no longer available. And another little laundry list of helping with transition, kind of all the things that I've already talked about, including attending events like this. So you're educating yourself, becoming familiar with what's available and how to start planning, going to resource fairs that might be available through your school or in the community, just to help, again, familiarize yourself with the different agencies and programs in your area. In terms of the child's IEP, again, identifying those strengths and interests that may translate into a vocational opportunity, and then addressing the needs and barriers to accessing the community in the IEP. So what are those things that they can be working on to help them have more access to their community? I kind of went over number 4. Emphasizing daily living skills and choice making at home. That's going to help improve their skills, increase their independence, and promote adult behavior and their self-concept. So those are things that you can be doing while they are in high school and in their transition programs. I already talked about touring adult service providers and just knowing what's available in your community. And then finally, using your own family network and connections with potential or prospective employers in the community where you already visit, or places that your child may be able to volunteer. Finally, try to stay informed, advocate, and vote. I can't emphasize that enough. If you're not already aware, many of the agencies that are supporting individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities were started by parents of individuals who did not have resources available, so they had to create them themselves. So advocating, introducing yourself to your state representatives, being informed about the bills that are being put forth to help improve services, that's how the change is made. So I can't emphasize that strong enough. There's advocacy groups, certainly the ARC of Illinois. I put iPad Unite. It's a Facebook group actually for transition aid students. There are a couple of other resources on there for children.
Family Matters new website is actually going to have an entire page to self-advocacy and how to advocate for yourself and at the state and national level. And don't forget too, we recently had a very good presentation from REP on your voting rights for individuals with disabilities. So make sure that's archived on our website. So if you have any questions related to your student or your young adult's right to vote, please watch that webinar.
Thank you. Just another visual. This is your journey to success is one step at a time, which fits in with our Step It Up for Clearbrook, our annual fundraiser we started a few years ago. And a bunch of links to additional resources, may be duplicative for what's available through Family Matters and on ARC of Illinois, but lots of great resources here. And my contact information as well. Again, you can feel free to email me or call me. You may have time for one or two more questions.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to stop the recording.